Welcome gallery, staff, councillors to Richmond Valley Council's March Ordinary Council meeting. I'll open the meeting with acknowledgement of country. Richmond Valley Council recognises the people of the Bungalow Nations as custodians and traditional owners of this land, and we value and appreciate the continual cultural connections to lands, their living culture and their unique role in the life of this region in the past, present and future. Mr General Manager, could you read the prayer, please?
Dear Lord, we meet to serve our Richmond Valley community, to use our resources wisely and well, to represent all members of our community fairly, to make decisions that promote the common good. We recognise our responsibility to the past and the future, and the rights and needs of both individuals and community. As trusted servants, we seek blessings on our deliberations and on our efforts here today. May we act wisely and well. Amen.
Amen. Our next item is public accession question time, and our first speaker is Dr. Richard Gates. Is Dr. Gates present? Okay, we'll move on to Mr. Rodney Falconer. He's from the Conservation Officer, BirdLife Northern Rivers, New South Wales. And the items that Mr. Falconer will be speaking was 19.3, Development Applications, February 2022. Welcome, Rodney.
Thank you very much.
We have a couple of little rules. One is that you will get a 4-minute bell. You speak for 5 and then you'll get the 5-minute bell. So
okay.
We are friendly here and we welcome you and look forward to your address.
Thank you very much. Do you mind if I just get myself ordered first, if that's all right?
Yep, that's
and can
fine.
I ask a very quick question of the councillors first? Just one really quick question, and that is,
you cannot question councillors. You will direct your questions to me or the General Manager,
fine.
please. Thank you.
What I was wondering at the time was how many councillors had been affected by the floods.
Looking around the room, I would say every councillor has had either affected themselves or family members have been affected.
Right, thank you for that. Okay, there's this. I'll try and turn this on. Sorry. Right, and okay. So I'm Rodney Faulkner, Conservation Officer of BirdLife Australia, Northern New South Wales and Northern Rivers. The Bungalow proposed camping enterprise, item 19.3. As a resident of neighbouring Lismore, my heart really goes out to the Richmond Valley and the awful damage done to places such as Coracai, Woodburn, the Broadwater and the Bungalow Valley. It's hard to imagine the long-term future of our homes in the face of such profound economic and personal destruction. The Bungalow development site considered here includes integral parts of a listed wetlands of national importance, a term that seems to have been shunned by both the proponent and, unfortunately, by council staff. Here's the federal government page. It's a directory of important wetlands throughout Australia. Which way will I go? This way? Okay, this gives you a rough idea of the area covered by those wetlands. You can see you've got Bungalow National Park up here. I should be able to use this one, I think. Yeah, there we go. Richmond River, and of course you've got Coracai on one side, Woodburn on the other. And all these little areas in here shows the complex. It's not one pond, it is a complex that all fits in together. When it floods, the fish move around. When it goes down, they are found in different places. All right. Now, this wetland is regarded as amongst the most significant in Australia, south of Cape York. I'll just leave that up for you while I'm talking about the rest of the stuff. It's extremely important. If it's an important wetlands, then it needs to be protected. If they're not, why were they listed? This contains native species listed as threatened at both state and national levels, as attested by both government officers and groups of experienced ornithologists. It lies directly within an important riparian zone. It sits on acid sulphate soils, a major legal constraint to excavation, as council and most local landholders will be well aware. It is immediately adjacent to a nature reserve. It lies in a vast and notoriously active floodplain. It is difficult to imagine a more foolhardy, irresponsible and inappropriate site for any such proposed development. The recent terrible floods, a 1 in 1,000 year flood coming only a couple of years after a 1 in 100 year flood, and who knows what's to come, have wrought havoc, misery and economic disaster in this and neighbouring government areas. The effects of these floods is likely to be exacerbated by neighbouring projects such as a Lismore levee and its planned enlargement and the newly upgraded highway. The only access point, the Bungalow-Whippery Road, to this project was inundated well before Saturday the 26th of February and long after Lismore was flooded. Moonham Road only became accessible on the 14th of March, while the Bungalow-Whippery Road accessible on Friday, March 11. This low-lying country has a well-known and marked history of frequent and unpredictable flooding. Council staff have unfortunately and regrettably approved the project subject to a swathe of conditions. Though most of these are laudable, they require assured and regular assessment and enforcement, something, especially at the moment, Richmond Valley Council is very unlikely to have the resources, priority and will to effectively carry out. We understand, I'll just move this on a bit, that the proponent, sorry, just got to find my place on the page again, has a demonstrated and recorded history of non-compliance in the face of inadequate council responses. So here you can see an aerial photo taken on the top right-hand side there of clearing one of those wetland areas illegally without permission and constructing a large area to put a shed on right next to the river, or to the creek. You can also see on the left-hand side a levee bank destroyed by a minor flood, not by this flood. So this flood has also damaged it, and there's heaps of expenses involved with that, and the protection of the river and the people beyond it. You can see two advertisements there that were both placed for people well before any approval was gained. One was taken down, but another one immediately put up despite lack of approval. Imagine carloads of family campers suddenly caught in a downpour or a flash flood, like the one that flooded the whole area. This one did that. They struggle to evacuate, many completely unsupervised, try to pack bulky vehicles with their possessions. A jumble of cars churns through swampy soils via a narrow winding route passing directly by the flooded river and so-called dam. It's actually a wetland of national importance. They get to the road only to find it flooded as well. Where do they find safety? What chances of all of them coming out of this unscathed? BirdLife Northern New South Wales strongly urges Richmond Valley Council to consider its potential culpability as well as its ethical, legal and economic vulnerability and responsibility. The consequences of approving such a legal action and approving such a totally unsafe, poorly supervised fiasco in this place could result in legal action and unnecessary expense to Richmond Valley residents. What a disaster this could be for everyone. Council needs to initiate a plan of management for its wetlands of national importance and consider nullifying the consent for this primitive camping ground. People are being put in harm's way and councillors truly must revisit this unfortunate and entirely inappropriate approval. Any compensation required for this might turn out to be far less expensive than subsequent legal actions. Richmond Valley Council cannot afford the consequences of this entirely inappropriate project. What an insane time to improve this at the same time as the biggest flood we've ever experienced. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you take questions from council?
Sure.
Has any councillors got any questions? No? Thank you for your
okay.
address.
Thank you very much.
Have a safe trip home, please.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to show this last one. This is land immediately next to the current proposed project, and these people are higher than the proposed project. So they're well above the flood level and they got wiped out. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, I noticed that Dr. Gates, we just put Mr Falconer in front of you so that the meeting didn't stall. So welcome Dr Gates, President of the Evans Head Memorial Aerodrome Committee Incorporated, and Dr Gates will be speaking on item 14.2, item 15.1 and item 19.3. When you're ready, Mr Gates, and you know the regulations,
Excuse me,
so
Mr Mayor.
know them very well.
Excuse
Thank
me, Mr Mayor. I've got some questions for Mr Gates before he commences, if you don't mind.
That's really out of...
No, I can do it.
well, Mr Gates, would you take a question first? Or
No, not until I've
Okay,
given
thank
my
you.
talk.
Yep, we can take that after. Thank you.
I can do it.
Sorry?
My heart goes out to the residents of Richmond Valley Council and those of neighbouring local government areas who've been affected by the current flood. The scale of the problem is difficult to comprehend, particularly for those who have never witnessed floods before, and even for those who have, because of its sheer size and accompanying human tragedy, which I've witnessed at first hand over the past couple of weeks. One of the reasons the Evans Head Memorial Aerodrome Committee fought so hard to preserve the Evans Head Memorial Aerodrome was to make sure that we had capacity in fire and floods to deal with issues of scale during disasters of this magnitude. I recall well the '56 flood, when Evans Head was cut off from the surrounding communities, yet aircraft were able to get in and out of Evans Head to deliver supplies, not only to Evans Head, but to surrounding communities. Why this full capacity was not utilised early on in the current disaster is not clear, but it is good to see it being used now. The RAAF, in its wisdom during World War II, developed a particularly effective drainage system which allowed the aerodrome to operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That drainage system at the southern end of the airfield was destroyed during the alleged decontamination of the airfield a decade ago, with the new housing development approved by the JRPP in August 2017 on the advice of Richmond Valley Council, adding to the drainage burden. I raised this matter at the hearing in 2017 as the public was denied access to the data used in the modelling, and the JRPP replied on the advice of Council in its deliberations despite our clear misgivings about what would happen. Despite a conditioned approval from the JRPP which made it clear that waters from the housing site were not to run on the neighbouring aerodrome site, which we predicted, that's exactly what has happened with potential long-term consequences for aerodrome infrastructure. There's a full video recording of the JRPP hearing from 2017. The reason I raised the matter of the aerodrome and flooding is that despite the compliance requirements in the DA approval, it would appear that none of these compliance requirements have been met. Silt fences were down and fill from the housing development poured onto the aerodrome, along with vast quantities of water. Not the first time this has happened. Failure to bring to police compliance requirements for building development is a serious issue with this council, which brings me to item 19.3, the approval given for the Bungalow and Bush Camp. Again, there are a number of compliance requirements set out in the approval for this development, but how is council planning to police these requirements? There is no on-site responsible officer. Council has approved a primitive bush camp in an area known to flood badly. I was on the road at Moonam Bridge the day before flooding began, and the water was already running over the road from the Bungalow Creek. Should there be a heavy downpour overnight with flooding in an area already saturated, as it is now, who will be there to advise the 70 campers that they need to get out? Councillors, in view of the current flooding circumstances, the responsibility falls to you to ask this approval to be revisited. You have been provided with a list of approvals for your information in the business papers. Section 8.2E of the Local Government Act makes it clear that council decision-making should be transparent and decision-makers are to be accountable for decisions and omissions. Councillors, because this information has been provided to you, I now ask that you request that the approval be revisited in view of the new flood evidence and potential risks to those who use the site, quite apart from any impact they might have on this environmentally sensitive and important site, which could easily put people in harm's way. You might want to argue that it's too late now to do anything about the approval, but I would argue that if you're made aware of a potential problem, you have an obligation to pursue it. Which brings me to the matter of the proposed Iron Gates development currently on exhibition, in year 8 of the exhibition. The flooding of the Iron Gates area, which has been known about for many years, is a real problem for that development. I've seen pictures of water over the bridge leading to the Iron Gates during this recent flooding episode, right over the top of the rails. It's time for Council to recommend to the Northern Regional Planning Panel that the development not proceed because of flood risk alone. I note that the report to Council mentions a very large sum of money for work to be done by Council to deal with the outcomes of the current flood, I believe 150 million now, and probably more. Is Council in a position that it can afford to approve a residential development in a flood-prone area such as the Iron Gates, thereby putting people again in harm's way? You should be aware that the floodplain mapping for the Iron Gates, by the way, is incorrect. Which brings me to my final point, 15.1, the financial report. Councillors, there is no doubt now that that catastrophic flood we have had in our local government is a result of climate change from fossil fuels and other factors, including poor planning, poor flood mapping, and the damming effect of the Pacific Highway upgrade on the natural floodplains. If you haven't seen high-level photography of what's happened, might I suggest that you ask for photos to see what actually has gone on. I note the acknowledged lack of transparency with regard to some investments made by Council, not Council's fault, particularly with regard to the fossil fuel industry, a known major contributor to climate change. You are investing this money for ratepayers. We ask you now to consider taking your investments away from institutions which fail to provide transparency, and particularly any investments tainted by the fossil fuel industry. It is a false economy to be investing in an industry which is a significant player in climate change and causes flooding. You are supporting future flooding, and you have an obligation under Section 82C of the local government to act to consider future generations under the principles of ecologically sustainable development. I do not see investment in the fossil fuel industry consistent with that responsibility. The 6th IPCC report on the climate shows that climate change is accelerating and impacts of climate change, I've just finished, are projected to continue and to become more severe. This is about Australian lives, livelihoods, as well as our economic and national security. Councillors, you're on the box seat to bring about change and have an obligation to do so. Please act. Thank you.
Thank you. Will you take questions?
Sure.
Councillors,
Happy
any
to.
questions? Mr Gates? No questions? Thank you for your
Right.
attendance.
Thank you very much.
Have a safe trip home.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is item 4. Apologies, I notice all councillors are present. All right. Councillors, item 5.1, mayoral minute. You have been distributed, I think, earlier with the an email, and I apologise for the lateness of this, but it was the reason it was purposely done, just in case there was any late updates from any government departments or where we were up to for the if anything had to be included into this minute. So I'd like to move that. If I can get a seconder, please.
Second, Mr Mayor.
Councillor, the question was asked earlier by one of the speakers who's been impacted on this. And in this room, I don't know about the gallery, but I do know that many staff and councillors have been affected and impacted themselves personally, family members or friends. And it's a trying time for our community. We've had, as the report said, in 2019 we endured one of the longest and hardest droughts on eastern New South Wales, and we were a part of that. That led to the bushfires that ravaged half of our council area. We then also had, I think the report says, 8 declarations, natural disaster declarations in 3 years. We've had COVID, and now the community has been brought to their knees with these floods. These floods are different to the fires, where I said 50% of our council area was devastated. That was in low population areas. These floods have really impacted from where we joined the Kyogle Council right through the valley in the highly densely populated areas to where we meet the Ballina Shire. The devastation in some of those villages in the lower area is unbelievable. You have to see it to believe it. And I know Lismore and Ballina get a lot of media coverage. That's because they have the big viewing audience. But some of those villages down there have been impacted as much as South Lismore. There's houses down there that have had their brick veneer walls washed out. Verandas are hanging off them. They've been moved off their foundations. Cars upside down. You can go near the bowling club at Broadwater where the mud is that deep to 300 metres down the road to where the school is, and you'll find crystal white sand 500 mil deep. It's just crazy and strange, and it's a big impact on not only our community but council's infrastructure and resources. And it's very hard to go down there and not come away hurt, but at the same time you can come away with your spirits lifted when you see community members joined by people from other regions lining up. And I must say a lot of these people are young people, very young people, in shorts, singlets, gumboots, work boots, mud all over them. And I would say in Woodburn and Broadwater there could be over 300 just getting into it and helping our community. We also have our emergency services. Actually, I will actually read the working together part, because to me it's a really big part of our recovery and the help, and I so much appreciate it. So, the Richmond Valley community has shown its strength and courage in facing its challenges, and I want to acknowledge the efforts of our emergency service, the ADF, the many volunteer groups and council staff who have worked so tirelessly during the early response phase of the flood. I also acknowledge the support of many agencies, charities and volunteers who are now leading the recovery phase. A heartfelt thank you to all those I mentioned. We are in this together, and we will succeed in building back better once again. And I think our community spirit, with the help of outside people, we will do it, but it's going to take time. This will take 2 to 3 years. It will be the term of this council. But I think if we all stay strong and work together, give each other a hug and a lot of love, we will endure this and come out the other end stronger and better than when we were. Anyone else like to speak?
I'd just also like to say thank you for all the communities that have, communities as well, the people from the outer regions that have donated from all over, from Canberra, from Inverell, as far as Cairns. They've all come to Coraki as if they were just angels. So, and there's a lot of people on the ground that as well that have worked so hard and are getting us in where we all need to be. And it's not just Coraki, it's the whole of the Richmond Valley area that's been affected. It's just been brilliant. So thank you.
Any other speakers? Councillors, I'll just touch on advocating for our community. We have had some high-level politicians here, and they have the purse strings. And we've had the Prime Minister, the Premier, the Deputy Premier, many ministers. Today, General Manager and I met with a Shadow Minister, Jason Clare, and tomorrow Bonnie Taylor will be in the area. I am making myself available for every politician that comes here. I think that's my role, to go and meet them, show them around and advocate for our community. Not only funding, but support going forward. And Vaughan's been there right beside me, and I thank him and the staff for their support to me. Personally, I've been very impacted on this, and sometimes it gets very emotional. It's hard, as other people in this room know. They've experienced this. But I'd just like to thank the councillors who have taken the time to contact me, support. And it's going to be long, as I said, but I believe the Premier is listening, and I would expect that there will be some very good announcements coming in the near future, and as there was in the fires, and I look forward to those. But the time is going to be the thing, and our community has to be patient. The enormity of this flood is beyond belief. I built a house in 1980 at the Bend, that's upriver of Casino, and I was told by the council I had to build it 1.2 metres to take advantage of that rather than put it on a mound or on stilts. I thought, well, if I'm going to spend that kind of money, I might as well go double storey and use the area underneath. That in 42 years, that bottom floor has never had a millimetre of water through it. I had 2 metres of water. That's the enormity of it, and it had a really fast flow in it, and I'm glad I went that extra because it didn't reach the top floor. So we saved a bit of stuff, but you know, I had heavy losses, and we lost a horse, which hurt as much as anything. It was part of our family for 17 years, and yeah, I will say, but it's great to see and rewarding to see that we haven't had, that I know of, anybody deceased in our council area. So that's good for our community. People aren't going through that. So I think I've said enough, and I've invited the councillors and no other speakers. I'll close that and put that motion. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Confirmation of the minutes, 6.1. Could I get a mover, please?
I'll move.
Councillor Hayes, seconder. Councillor Cornish. That's on the accuracy of the minute. Anyone okay with the accuracy? Put that motion in. All those in favour? Carried. Matters arising. Has any councillor got any matters arising out of those minutes? We'll move on then. Declarations of interest. Has any councillors got declaration? Mr General Manager, have you had any declarations?
No, none received.
Petitions nil, notice of motions nil. We now move over to page 9. Mayoral attendances. I'll move that.
Second.
Councillor Morrissey, any questions or statements out of that? Put that motion in. All those in favour? Carried. Delegates' reports on page 10, 12.1. Could I get a mover, please?
I'll move.
Councillor Hayes, seconder.
Second.
Councillor Humphreys. Any questions?
I'd just like
Councillor
to
Hayes.
congratulate the new chairperson of the Rouse County Council. And, don't want to overlook how important it is at this time, but the floods are taken over, but it's an important role, and I know your experience will carry this council well into Rouse in their decision making. So
Thank you, and it will have this flood on flood mitigation. There'll be a lot of issues that'll come out of that too. And there's been major infrastructure losses for Rouse, both in all avenues of the 3 counties that they merged with, and one of those will be weeds. In a flood like this, there'll be a distribution of a lot of seed banks into different areas of our the north coast, and also a lot of hay being brought in to feed and fodder for the stock that's being distributed from our other areas of the state. So It's like that same thing happened in the drought. When the fodder was brought in, there was a lot of weed infestation. The thing is, but the ground's moist, so it's going to go bang all of a sudden. So, and then flood mitigation and naturally the water supply. So, any other questions? Put that motion then. All those in favour? Carried. Councillors, page 15, matters determined without debate. Has any councillors got any matters? Councillors, I'll call 14.1 and 14.2. Any other? Okay, so I think I need a motion then for 15.1. Is that correct? Can I get that, please? Councillor Humphries.
Second.
And I'm sorry, who seconded that? Councillor Cornish. I'll put that motion in. All those in favour? Carried. So, councillors, I call 14.1. I'll move that.
Second.
Councillor Hayes, and before I speak, I'll ask the General Manager to speak to that report, please. Yeah. Putting you on the spot, isn't it?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just the thought went through my mind, where do I start? Because obviously it's been a massive few weeks. Obviously a lot of detail in this report, which is, I suppose the key point is, it's just the start of the assessment process for the impacts from this flood event. So, yeah, we obviously needed to bring that to your attention, that this is what is emerging. Our teams are working long hours and getting things fixed as quickly as we can so that people can get on with their lives. Obviously, in some areas, as a couple of the photos show, major washouts. So obviously we're focusing on in remote areas so that people can actually get in and out. That's challenging, as that photo at the Upper Cherry Tree Road shows. That's not something you can fix in a hurry. So obviously we are working with that community to identify a potential diversion so that they can get in and out. I think beyond that, we're talking about 6 properties. So it's an example, just one example of the impact of this in our remote areas. So yeah, look, the report sets out impacts on roads, drains, bridges, culverts, our water sewer network. Obviously, when your sewage system goes fully underwater, including pump stations, as happened in Woodburn, that creates some big challenges. So, but as only today I've had updates from on our roads, bridges, drainage, our water sewer. Our teams are doing a phenomenal job to bring things back online as quickly as they can, and to get things functional. So, I suppose for me, a shout out to our teams who are busy doing that. As the Mayor has said, we've certainly got plenty of staff who've been impacted both directly and indirectly, and that has affected their ability to be at work and to do their jobs. But they have helped where they can, but also our other staff have stepped up and covered for that. But it's certainly having it has an impact on all of us. Fatigue, something we're carefully managing because this is a long haul, but also I suppose just important for you to know that we are advocating hard for our community. I spend a lot of my times on regional recovery committees and meetings with other agencies, obviously meetings with politicians, briefing the offices of the politicians as well on what we need, what can be done to get our communities back and living in good conditions. There's certainly people living at the moment not in good conditions, and we're very aware of that. So we're working hard to get some solutions. As you know, we had discussions about that in Corrikai this afternoon. I was on a meeting this morning about those very things. So I suppose the message to you as the elected council, we're very conscious of all of that, working hard, getting a lot of feedback, responding to that. And I think the overall sense from the community is, and I've had a lot of messages direct to me thanking us for the job that we are doing, the speed at which we're responding. It is a massive clean-up, but we knew it was going to be massive, so we jumped on the front foot and we got in and got casino done quickly while the floodwaters were still up in those other areas, and then we've moved into those other towns and villages as quickly as we've been able to get plant and trucks and machinery in. So our team has led that waste clean-up. We've been working closely with Public Works to identify transfer station sites for that, one of which is our Corrikai quarry. So it's just one example of the sorts of things that we're doing to get the job done. We do understand that having waste outside your property is distressing. We're not able to get everywhere tomorrow, but we are working through that methodically. Obviously, where there's risks or high priority areas, we're dealing with that, but we will get that job done. So, just want to, I suppose, acknowledge all of our staff for their efforts, but also the many community groups, other agencies, and groups like Disaster Relief Australia, who we met with today, who've stepped into Corrikai and are really helping put some structures around how we support that community, but also community like Broadwater, who's got local community members who've stepped up and are leading that community through a recovery. So, I mean, those stories are everywhere. They're just a few. But happy to, there's a lot happening. Happy to take any questions if you had specific things that you wanted to either highlight or know about.
I'd just like to make comment. I've got a couple of items here that I'd like to get an update on if you can in a minute, but just before I do, when we first kicked off down there after recovery, when the water went down and everyone stood back and had a look, and there was no army in town for the first couple of days, I think it was, before we actually seen them on the ground. People were standing in their yards, they started stripping their houses out, they made piles of rubbish. You turn around and looked in the backyard of a lot of places, they were just chock-a-block full of next door neighbours' stuff and stuff from miles away. I remember looking in my daughter's backyard from the back veranda and thought, tomorrow we're going to get in and clean her up. Mate, it was a huge job. Army turned up, mate, within 2 hours there was 20 blokes in there, all the heavy stuff was gone. Made it so much better.
It's funny, I'll just comment on that. I was in Corrikai the day the army come to town. They got there about 10:30, and just the spirits, you could see the people. It was just a change. They're here, there's a uniform here, we've got help. And it's just, and they did help, like more than help. They just got in, and it was just, you could see the mood change. I don't know, did you notice it? Yeah. Sorry, Councillor, you were speaking.
We run out of words, but today I come up from through Evans to Woodburn. Army were lined up along the Evans-Woodburn road, clearing stuff. Look, there would have been 500 metres of trucks and machinery there. They'd moved around town. I got to Corrikai, they were moving through Corrikai. And when I got to Casino, there was trucks coming out of Casino heading down that way. So, it's been huge.
There's two camps of them here. One's at the Primax and one's out at the showground. And what's there, 600 or 700 of them total?
Oh, I think there's 1,000 in Casino. I think another 500 were moving into the Evans Head Aerodrome. They're setting up, I think, at some of those are going to use, I think, the Woodburn Bowling Club potentially. So they can stay basically anywhere. They obviously just need some toilet facilities and they've got rations packs, and so they're basically self-sufficient, their operation. And I think it was estimated at one point that there would be 4,000 to 5,000 troops on the ground in the Northern Rivers to support the recovery. And I reckon they're all here, across the region. And it's just a massive task, and great to have them here.
And General Manager and I went over. We were invited to go over to the showground and meet them, and their commanding officer took us around and showed us a lot of the logistics stuff, and up in the members bar, and the setup there's, you know, it's all strategic, which you'd expect with an army and maps and plans and that. And I said to them, look, they're from Darwin, this corps, and I said, you know, what do you do all day? And they said, we train to be soldiers. And I said, well, this isn't soldier work. Did they, you know, did they say, oh, we're going in there? He said, everyone put their hand up. He said, we had one bloke, his wife's due to have a baby in 2 weeks, and he wanted to come. And we said, no, you're staying home. So they are really, really keen to be here, and they're friendly, they're helpful, they're obliging, and they just, we had a meeting today, and they just asked Vaughan a few questions, and anything you want, you know, we're here to help you. And they're going to use our depot at Korakai to store things, and like a warehouse, and distribute it out of there. So yeah, great to have them here.
Just the amount of machinery they've got on the ground, front end loaders and dozers and forklifts and stuff, that we just wouldn't be able to get them. They've just come bought them, they've just rode them in from everywhere. So yeah, it's been good. So, and look, the other thing is at Woodburn, and I'm sure, and at Broadwater Hall, the supermarkets they've set up, I just thought, you go there, you're going to get black and gold food, mate. They're great places to go and restock, and yeah, there's nothing there you can't get.
And Councillor Hayes, they're not only just distributed stuff, it's a place to go. And I know the one at Broadwater has a happy hour. So they have a happy hour at 4:30 every afternoon, and people go there, and it's like a hub. They're catching up, they're talking. I know a bloke called Ronnie from Broadwater. He was really down, and he went there, and he was telling me, son, the best thing I've done. He said, I hadn't seen my friends for over a week. I was getting depressed. He caught up with 2 of his friends. They talked for 2 hours. But while you're having this happy hour, there's doctors or paramedics or nurses there, and they look at you and assess your feet and everything like that. And I called in there the other day. Well, the Premier had a beer there, but I called in there the other day, and while I was there having a beer, they gave me a tetanus needle. So, you know, there's things like that for the community. So, yeah, so it's really good.
I actually had the nurse dress a couple of wounds on my feet from the flood, and the toe that I had here a couple of weeks ago is played up, so she's fixed that up for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Probably just a key message to the community, anyone you run into or is the help is there. Everyone needs to ask for it. Don't be too proud. Go to the recovery centres, make the phone calls, get on the list. If you're on the list, the Army will turn up. They are looking for work actively. So yeah, just encourage anyone you run into, if they need a hand, they're there to help.
I've got a couple of infrastructure things here that I just want to ask questions on, how they're affected. You may not be able to answer them. The north wall in Evans Head, is there someone onto that having a look at it, assessing it? It's pretty poor. I just got a photo come through on my phone about 10 minutes ago, actually, of looking at the river under it.
I'd have to take that on notice. I'm not sure.
No, that's fine.
But yeah.
Just as long as it doesn't get overlooked, that's all.
Yep.
Gets put in the right place. And a question on the rail trail. I assume it's been affected from Tweed right through to here.
Look, every project has been affected. I don't think we have pretty much turned a sod on any of our larger capital works programs, and even, you know, our roads programs. Obviously, we've been busy getting things going. So no, it's progress has been affected. Obviously, the swimming pool project as well. So our focus in the last 2 weeks has obviously been supporting people through this, getting emergency works done, and we will be taking stock as we can in amongst, obviously, planning and supporting recovery as well, to get those projects happening as quickly as we can, because they're important. But obviously, you know, things like the pool project, there will be delays. It was going to be delayed anyhow, due to the wet summer that we've had. So yeah, but we'll be reviewing that over the next few weeks, and we'll keep you in touch. But our capital program will have delays, but we're conscious that we obviously need to fix things, but we also need to keep our community rolling, keep these projects happening. But we're talking with funding bodies already and we'll keep you updated.
So, General Manager, I'd like to ask the directors if they'd like to speak in your roles, but I'll start up off with, if that's okay, I'll start up with direct.
Respond to rail trail first?
I did, yes.
Okay.
I'll respond to rail trail first.
Just to give you a quick update on the rail trail, we'll have our contractors back on that job within 2 weeks. So we're actually going to start.
What about the pool?
They were in the pool today. Yeah.
Do you want me to answer that one too? With regards to the pool, the contractors were back this week, so full steam ahead there as well. Yeah, and not a great deal of damage there. It was just full of rainwater, so it wasn't inundated by the flood. So that one's not too bad in the scheme of things.
Do you want to say anything else on your directorate while you're there with the floods?
No, I actually caught up with our projects team today just to take stock of where all our major projects are at, because we haven't had that focus in the last couple of weeks, obviously. So we will be sort of bringing a list together of our grant funds and milestones and asking for a few extensions, because these things have obviously going to affect a few of our end dates. So nothing too dramatic, but it's going to be the same old stuff like supply chain, materials, access to contractors. It's just going to be exacerbated in the next little while, I think. So we're planning to mitigate that risk at the moment.
Director Jones?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Some of you will know that my other hat that I wear here at Council is the Local Emergency Management Officer. It's been a wild ride the last 2 weeks or so. First day back in the office today. It's a bit of a surreal experience not being in an EOC, which is the Emergency Operations Centre, where we were at Gunnellabar at the Lismore City Council chambers. I did spend a few days in my bedroom being in the EOC connected, because I couldn't actually get into Gunnellabar, and that's, you know, I was lucky I was only isolated for a day or two. So just wanted to give a shout out to all my staff. They're the people that have been out and about in the yellow shirts, trying to get our water and sewer systems up and running, opening and closing roads. I think they've gone above and beyond. There's some exceptional stories that I'm hearing back from my staff about what they've experienced and seen. I was fortunate enough to go in a helicopter with our local commander, Superintendent Tanner, a couple of days into the flood event, and saw the devastation from the air and how far the floodwaters actually reached. It was quite sobering. We landed in Woodburn on the helipad. There was a tiny, weeny bit of grass surrounded by water, and it was a bit of a tenuous exercise because they were worried that the signs around the place might have flown off into the propellers, and that the skids on the helicopter were sinking into the ground as we were landing. We went down there to see the police officers who had been with that community, who had been isolated for days, and assisting in the evac centre that had been established at the school. And I know there's very similar stories at Broadwater and Coraki also. I also got to fly over Lismore, and I personally haven't ventured into Lismore on purpose. I don't want to see it. I've seen enough on the news. But that devastation in Lismore is the same as what we're experiencing in our towns and villages, slightly to a lesser scale, but by no means not as in any less importance. Been working really hard to make sure that our communities are cared for, and I can now tonight tell you that we've got community support facilities going into Woodburn and Coraki this week, which are banks of toilets, showers and laundry facilities that are sort of in large sort of donga buildings. There'll be 24-hour security, lights, traffic control, etc., cleaning, regular maintenance. And these facilities will be in place for however long they need to be in place. So Woodburn is being established on Thursday, adjacent to the bowling club site, and on Friday morning in Coraki, and then it's going to be on the road adjacent to the Uniting Church Hall. So we've had some wins there, and thanks through resilience and the ADF and all the other government agencies that we've managed to source these things from Melbourne, because as you can imagine, all these shower and toilet facilities and lights and generators and everything else are few and far between, because I think the North Coast has taken up nearly every available resource in Australia. So we are moving forward into making some inroads into that recovery process. There is a large regional recovery centre that's set up at the university, Southern Cross University. I was there yesterday. There's a cast of thousands there with agencies from every corner of the state there representing their agencies, and they're getting tasked and moving forward and getting things done. So Councillor Hayes, I'd love to see that photograph of the wall, and I can push it through my channels in the recovery centre. So if you do happen to hear or see anything like that needs to be attended to, or there's a community need out there, myself and the recovery team would love to hear about it, because we have official channels that we can push those items up through to the regional recovery committee to be tasked to appropriate people to deal with them.
Just two comments on the staff involvement in Evans Head that I noticed. The first day we got a garbage collection, everyone was waiting for garbage collection, their bins were full. Ian Brown turns up in the garbage truck, he drives up the street, and because everyone's come to town, there's cars everywhere, so hard to pick the bins up, and he's going along yelling out the window, "Put your bins out, I'll be back in 5 to get them. Put them out in the middle of the road so I can get to them." He did that in every street where I seen him. I took my own bin to the tip because I missed him, and I might have been the next day, but I got to the tip and come into the operator of the tip, and here's Luke Fail there. "How do you operate this thing?" Anyway, he done a few things, got me through the tip, and he said, "Oh, it's free, that's easy." So Luke was out there at the tip, so yeah, it was good.
Can I say, that's just one example. We had staff that, you know, in the survey and design team that were assisting at weighbridges. We had staff in boats dropping food. We had library staff at evac centres. Where our staff were isolated, they just stepped up and did whatever they needed to do or could do within their means to assist the community. And that's a great story of Luke, a surveyor working a weighbridge at a waste facility. So that's what you've got to do when you've got to do it. One last quick thing that I forgot to tell you. I had the privilege of briefing both the Prime Minister and the Premier on 2 separate occasions when they came into the EOC, and also the Governor-General. And what I did tell them was that the emergency management rule book has been completely thrown out the window. We come up with these wonderful plans and we do work with them, but this event is absolutely unprecedented. There is nothing that we could have planned or prepared for this. And I think that all the services out there that are probably getting a pretty rough time in the media, I've got to say, have gone above and beyond, and they've done everything in their means to cope and respond, and now working into recovery for this event. You couldn't plan for something like this. It's not possible.
Director Gator, do you want to?
Yeah, well, my team's been quite busy, obviously, with P&C looking after our staff. We've got a number of our staff directly affected. I've been affected myself, so I've actually been off work, and Director Zella's been looking after my guys for me, which is good, but back this week, which is good. So yeah, all the we've got to get all our accounting correct and make sure we record all the costing properly for these natural disaster claims. So all the accountants are very busy with that. We actually had our P&C manager down at the tip working the weighbridge as well. So we've got a jack of all trades. A lot of our staff are jack of all trades at the moment. Also got a number of my staff that are actually on the ground as the council representatives at the various community hubs and whatnot down in the lower river, so we can get the information direct from those hubs. So yeah, I think it's affected every department in council, yeah, and the staff are stepping up tremendously. It's really good.
Just one thing I'd like to mention that I'd be remiss if I didn't was I think we've showed a lot of leadership in particularly the flood waste cleanup, particularly in the first couple of days after the event. Our waste staff went absolutely above and beyond. Just like to mention Dave Morgan, and he'd be very embarrassed that I've mentioned him, but he drove a truck for nigh on 5 days straight, delivering the skip bins to the CBD and casino and then going back and picking them up. He went very hard for a lot of days, and we've got a lot of great feedback about how nice he was when he was doing it, and the community really appreciated that. We've had Daniel Rowlands has led the curbside pickup of flood waste, and he's absolutely gone above and beyond. I think we're starting to see some results there in the towns. It's been a slow and steady process because we've been trying to manage where we put this at the other end. We've set up temporary waste transfer stations, one at a quarry at Corokai, which is not ideal, but again, that's a community organisation, a company that's come to the party to help us out there. But I just think that's, we're not quite there yet, but we're getting pretty close, so bear with us and we'll come back and we'll pick up every last bit of curbside rubbish. So, and a shout out to our local contractors that have helped us out with that as well. Thanks.
Any other speakers? Councillors, I'd just like to mention that I have been contacted by some mayors from other councils, and they have followed up on a few promises. One, I believe the General Manager has used some of Coffs Harbour staff assisting us, and some other councils have been here.
Yeah, so Coffs Harbour, also Lake Macquarie, we had a couple of staff from Lake Macquarie join us today, a couple of building surveyors, something we were short of before this happened. But we have a few more coming, and they're basically coming to help us out, pretty self-sufficient. Actually, their Deputy General Managers dropping in tomorrow to drop off a caravan to support their team. So really appreciate the efforts of Lake Macquarie, but we've also from Coffs Harbour, and we've had contact from others offering support as well. So, and also obviously we are working closely with our neighbours, neighbouring councils. We're all going through this. So as general managers, we're in touch regularly and helping each other out where we can. Although we've all sort of got our hands full in our own patches as well. But that support's appreciated. And neighbouring mayors we've been contacting each other and talking, and what we're experiencing that too. So that's been very supportive. The Premier, when he visited, he did say he had 3 priorities. One was accommodation for community members who'd been displaced. The other one was a clean-up. It's a health issue, and he wants to get off the street. It's not only a health issue for physically, it's also a mentally. You walk out in that street and you see that, and you go straight back down to where you were the night before. And he wanted to get some dollars in some people's pockets. You must realise there's people out there have lost their homes, they've lost their jobs, some have lost their cars, they've got no transport, and some have lost their identity because their wallets and identifications, and they're gone too. So some people are really struggling, so he's trying to get some money to them so they can get on with a little bit of normality. And I would say that there was a lot learnt out of the fires that will help us with the recovery. But as Director Jones said, this is unprecedented, and there's no way you could have planned for it, as you couldn't have planned for those fires neither. So we've had 2 kicks in the guts in 3 years, and it's been very, very hard. We are concentrating a lot on the lower river, but I'd just like to mention that Casino was also hit. You've only got to drive over the Irving Bridge and have a look how that river is devastated. I have never seen it to that extent, and I've seen a fair few floods. It's to see that driveway totally ripped apart down under the bridge. It's just mind-boggling. And I've seen a video of the water coming up from the footbridge corner down there, up Barker Street and going into Walker Street.
I never thought I would see that in my life in Casino. It's in anyone's living memory. I don't think it's occurred. So I don't even think it occurred in '54. There was some talk of it back in the 1880s. But yeah, it's just, and I believe we could have had, when you look at the heights, there could have been 400 businesses or homes inundated in Casino. So, you know, that's a lot. Not to the extent of down the Lower River, but once you get flood water in a house and it hits your carpet and your gyprock, you know, it wouldn't have gone to the double stories naturally, but it still impacted Casino residents too. And the General Manager and Director Zeller and I had a bit of experience. We were at Coracai the other week and the Army said we're going down to Woodburn because the roads were closed. We wanted to get there and see what was happening in Woodburn. And they had these bushmasters and they went down in the morning and they said if we can punch through is the word they use, in the morning we'll come back and there'll be some seats available. So we jumped in the bushmaster and went through some very deep water and left a really good bow wave out in the rural area. And yeah, it was, when we got there, it was early times in Woodburn, and we went up to the school, which was the evacuation centre, and had a look around there. So yeah, that was an experience. And unfortunately, it poured rain. A couple of people got soaking wet. They went for a walk, yeah, so we've been out and about, and just to close, I do note in my mayoral minute a statement, "I've never been so proud to be the Mayor of Richmond Valley and a part of this close-knit and caring community. I have witnessed what our staff has gone through. Some of those have had a lot of personal loss, but the efforts they have done, and I introduced our library manager, Gary, to the Governor-General the other day as our library manager, and Gary was out in the streets coordinating in Coracai. And to say what all the other things I've seen and what they've done and helping people, I can say honestly, sitting here now, and I want it passed on, please, Mr General Manager, that I've never been so proud to be their mayor. They have been outstanding for our community. So if you pass that on, please. Any other speakers?
Just one more comment. You talked about Casino being impacted. You know, Evans Head's been impacted, probably not as much as the other towns, but with the clean-up and the things that are going on in town with accommodation and people camping in spots that, you know, that they need to be in, every square foot of Evans Head is getting used. There were some houses on Bungalow Road impacted, on Bungalow, in it, on the other side of the river, with floodwater in their homes. They're going to need clean-ups. There's piles of rubbish out there. I don't know if you're aware of that, as they are everywhere else. There's a couple of houses on the town side of the river impacted. Went through the co-op, so there was a little bit of stuff down there that, you know. So they'll need assistance in cleaning up, no doubt, and then they'll get it. I realise that. We've talked about the wall, and just look, everyone. There was a lot of coordination going on at that school. There was a lot of contact between private helicopter firms and that getting drops out, and I could go on and on and on and on. I don't think we need to mention names, but later on when it all settles down, I think we need to probably acknowledge some of the stuff that's going on, not just Evans Head, but everywhere. I know there's going to be stories coming out like...
And I think I'm very pleased that Evans Head wasn't impacted like some of those other villages, because Evans Head played its role in evacuating people from Woodburn and Broadwater to the RSL club, the school, and Camp Canonia, and there's still some people at Camp Canonia. So Evans Head has been a very vital township in that area.
The fleet of boats that went out to Woodburn and into Broadwater to bring people in the night that it went into the houses, you know, was astronomical to be able to ring someone and get a message through. I actually got my daughter out of a house at 2 o'clock in the morning when they were told that they had to sit tight until the next morning. I don't think she would have lasted. She would have went berserk. So, no, there's some good stuff.
Yep, very good. Any other speakers? I'll put that motion in. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Council's 14.2 on page 22. Get a mover, please. I did call it. I'll move it. Second to Councillor Cornish. I'd just like to congratulate staff of having this plan in the very early days. Has been updated a couple of times, and it was ready to give to the Prime Minister on his visit to Lismore. We gave them a copy of that. The Premier has a copy. The Deputy Premier has a copy. So the staff are on the front foot with this, and I would imagine that going forward it will be reviewed and there will be changes made as there are more need identified. And it's like the fires again. We were one of the first councils to have a recovery plan ready, and it was used by some of the other agencies for recovery across the state. So I congratulate you, Mr. General Manager, and all the staff for getting on the job, getting on the front foot, and putting our council in a very good position for the recovery process. Any other councillors? And I noticed there is some item 4. There will be some rating relief, but that will come back to a further meeting in April after we see what the state government come up with. I think that's a good gesture very early, but we will be reviewing that in April. And we have to try to give our community a helping hand through some financial issues. Councillor Hayes.
With the flood-affected buildings, the knockdowns, and some of the businesses that want to get up and get going, with the process to lodge an application to rebuild, is that going to be similar to what's happened in the bushfires? Are we going to be able to do something?
I talked to the General Manager about that today, so I'll ask him to answer that.
Yeah, we're certainly looking at how we can streamline that. Obviously, with the numbers involved, it's going to be a lot more than was with the bushfires. And there is an option with where it's a straight rebuild. There's an orders process that can be used, which is a much quicker process. So our building surveyors are working up the specific way to do that, so that we can have a fact sheet and give that out to those affected. I have a conversation with an affected business in Woodburn. I think we'll be using potentially as a bit of a pilot to work with them. So definitely something we're conscious of. I know with the bushfire DAs and CCs, we had a 5-day turnaround, of which at times was 3 days. That's going to be challenging on this scale, but the help we've got with 2 additional building surveyors today from Lake Macquarie, it's a chance to get some outside perspectives as well and get some systems in place so we can do things as quickly as we can. And just on the flood response document, we've also got, as you're aware, we were doing a economic development strategy for the Richmond Valley, and had a consultant supporting us with that. We've switched him across to assist us with an economic impact assessment, and as part of that, he will be doing some specific case studies of some of the businesses that have been affected by the floods, because especially in places like Woodburn and Broadwater, you've got just a few key businesses or industries that have been impacted, and they are critical to understand how they've been impacted, but what is required to get them back on their feet. So that work's happening over the next couple of days so that we can build that into this response plan, that future versions will be provided to government so they have the detail on what we need what they can do to help us recover our towns and villages and their economies.
Just so that you're aware, there was when the Premier was in Woodburn, we had a meeting there at Sly's timber yard, and most of it evolved around what business can do to stay afloat and get going again. But what it got to was a lot of those businesses employ the people that live next door and down the road and around the corner, And if those people don't get back into work shortly, they're not going to be able to afford to stay in town. They're going to lose all their skilled workers, and then it makes it so hard for them to restart their businesses without those skilled workers. So it's a never-ending circle to keep them there and to get them back into work as soon as we possibly can. So hopefully the Premier took that on board and can help out there. I know Vaughan was there and knows all about it, so hopefully we get a bit of a result from that. Yeah.
Did you want to say anything else on the recovery plan? You good? Okay. Any other speakers? I'll put that motion in. All those in favour? Whoops. I'll put it. Like an auctioneer, when you knock it down, it's too late. Okay, so councillors, we're now on page 28. Community service delivery, projects and business development, general business, they're all nil items, and as you can appreciate, the agenda is a bit light on because, as stated earlier, a lot of council staff resources have been impacted by the floods, so we will definitely have a full agenda, I would think, in April. Page 29, matters for information. Could I move it, please?
Moved.
Councillor Morrissey. Second?
Second.
Councillor Cornish. Any items any councillor would like a question on? I'll put that motion in. All those in favour? Carried. Page 40, I believe. Questions on notice nil. Questions for the next meeting in writing? Here's your chance.
I haven't written it yet, but I can write it down. When this all settles down and we sit around a table and we start to talk and bring community members in as to what can be done in the future, I'm not saying flood-proof, but to improve things in the future, can that committee be, you know, if it becomes a committee, be chosen of people that have been on the ground during the flood as well as everyone else, so that we get representation from the people across the agricultural industry and people that live on the river, people that know the river, know the history, the businesses down there that know what happens during a flood in the past and how it's been so different this time. And there's a lot of ideas floating around as, you know, as to why the levels were so high, what can be done to reduce those levels if it ever happens again. I think it all needs to be taken on board. I don't know how much science is around it or how much fact is going to be around it, but I think they need to be consulted, and in a big way. You know, I really think personally the river down our way needs to be assessed from the river mouth backwards instead of from the top end down, and maybe there's some answers there. So, so that's a bit of the community input I've been getting since the flood.
So the question is?
When council form some kind of committee, if there's going to be such a thing, that the general public or, you know, the general, are involved in that process.
I don't know if that should be a council. I think that needs to be looked at if it's going to be a review done by any government department. Council can be a part of that.
Maybe
Because
the question is, can council advocate to make sure that committee is an even mix across the community and involves every industry and every agricultural, you know.
A review done with...
Yep.
Okay. Yep.
Make that up, okay?
Yep. Okay, that'll be for the... You can work something with that. Okay.
Same as a question, and we can bring a report back to the next meeting.
Is that all right? Okay. It doesn't need a motion or nothing, it's just... No.
Time
How about that be formed up and sent to you, and you can have some... Okay. Is that okay?
Yep, okay, and send it to all councillors. Yep.
Page 41. I need a recommendation, mover to go into closed. Councillor Morrissey. Seconder.
Second.
Councillor Cornish. Mr General Manager, has there been any written representation made regarding this meeting going to closed council?
No.
Are there any verbal representations from the members of the public? I'll put that motion in. All those in favour? Carried. Councillors, we are now in closed council. No, Gary? Gone? Mr General Manager, would you like Director Gator to read that? Director Gator.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It was resolved that number one, for the supply and delivery of, for report tender supply and delivery of stationery T522122OROC, it was resolved that number one, for the supply and delivery of stationery, Council appoints the following tenderers to a panel of suppliers for the period 1 April 2022 to 31 March 2024. Dolphin Stationery Proprietary Limited, trading as Dolphin Office Choice, and Wink Australia Proprietary Limited. Number two, a provision is allowed for a further 12-month extension to the contract based on satisfactory supplier performance, which may take the contract through to 31 March 2025. And number three, the General Manager be authorised to negotiate and finalise the terms and conditions of any contract or agreement in line with the content of this report and the available budget, and affixing the seal of council where necessary.
Thank you. Councillors, I'd just like to say that it was a very short agenda with three major items, the three main items in the... but we can see for three items has gone for almost an hour and a half. It's been a very important meeting for our community, what we've endured and going forward, and sometimes an emotional meeting. I'd just like to say we'll get through this, we'll stick together, we'll be one team and united, and let's all support each other, and we'll come out the other end. So thanks again, and everyone have a safe trip home. Thank you.